The Statue of Liberty, the impossible dream that changed America. Welcome. Today I am going to tell you a story that will change everything you thought you knew about one of America's most iconic symbols. You might have heard about the Statue of Liberty before. Maybe you know it as a symbol of freedom, a welcoming beacon for immigrants, or that giant green lady in New York Harbor. But today, I am going to tell you the real story, the story of betrayal, broken promises, and a friendship between two nations that almost never happened. The Statue of Liberty is not just a statue. It is a monument to impossible dreams, political intrigue, and the determination of one man who refused to give up. A gift so ambitious that both France and America nearly abandoned it. A symbol so powerful that it transformed the meaning of an entire nation. This is the story of Frédéric Auguste Bartholdi, a French sculptor with a vision that seemed insane. A man who spent 21 years of his life fighting to build a statue that most people said could never be built. And this is the story of how a 151-foot copper woman holding a torch became the most recognized symbol of hope in the entire world. After listening to this, you will be shocked to know the secrets hidden inside Lady Liberty, the political battles, the financial disasters, the engineering miracles, and the dark truths that history books don't tell you. And this is not just a history lesson. This is a perfect story for your English listening practice. So sit back, relax, and let me take you on a journey across the Atlantic Ocean, a journey of friendship, struggle, genius, and an unforgettable legacy that still welcomes millions to America's shores. Now, let's begin. The Dream. A French dinner that changed history. To understand the Statue of Liberty, we must go back in time to a summer evening in 1865. The place, an elegant dinner party near Versailles, France. The host, Edouard de La Boulaye, a famous French political thinker and admirer of America. Picture this scene. A grand dining room filled with intellectuals, politicians, and artists, crystal chandeliers casting warm light on fine china and expensive wine. Outside, the sun is setting over manicured gardens. Inside, passionate men are debating the future of democracy. France in 1865 was suffering under Napoleon III, a dictator who had crushed French freedoms. Elections were rigged, the press was censored, political opponents disappeared into prison. And these men at dinner, these idealists, they dreamed of something better. They looked across the Atlantic Ocean to America, where democracy still survived, and they felt hope. La Boulaye raised his glass and said something that would change history. Wouldn't it be wonderful if France gave America a monument to celebrate their freedom, a gift from one republic to another, to honor the friendship between our nations and to remind France what true liberty looks like? The room fell silent. Then everyone started talking at once. What kind of monument? How large? How much would it cost? Where would it stand? But one man at that dinner said nothing. He simply stared ahead, his mind racing with possibilities. His name was Frédéric Auguste Bartholdi. He was 31 years old, a sculptor with talent but no major works to his name. And in that moment, listening to La Boulaye's words, a vision exploded in his mind. A statue, not just any statue, a colossal statue. A woman holding a torch high above her head, welcoming the world to freedom's shore. So massive that ships could see her from miles away. So magnificent that she would become the symbol of everything America represented. From that moment, Bartholdi became obsessed. This statue consumed him. It became his life's work, his mission, his destiny. But he had no idea that making this dream real would take 21 years of struggle, heartbreak, and battles that almost destroyed the entire project. Because building the Statue of Liberty was not a simple task, it was a miracle, and like all miracles, it required sacrifice, genius, and an almost insane level of determination. The sculptor, a man with an impossible vision. Frédéric Auguste Bartholdi was born in 1834 in Colmar, France. His father died when he was young, and his mother, a strict and domineering woman, controlled every aspect of his life. Even as an adult, even after he became famous, she treated him like a child. She chose his clothes, managed his money, and tried to control who he could marry. But Bartholdi found freedom in art. In sculpture, he could create worlds where he had complete control. He traveled to Egypt and was mesmerized by the colossal monuments of the pharaohs, the Sphinx, the pyramids, these massive structures that had stood for thousands of years. He thought, why can't we build monuments like this in the modern age? When he returned to France, he proposed building a giant lighthouse in the form of an Egyptian peasant woman at the entrance to the Suez Canal. He called it Egypt Bringing Light to Asia. He drew elaborate sketches. He pitched it to everyone who would listen. But Egypt said no. They thought it was too expensive, too ambitious, too strange. Bartholdi was crushed. His grand vision seemed dead. Then came that dinner party in 1865, and suddenly his Egyptian lighthouse found new life. He would transform it into something even better. Not a lighthouse for Egypt, but a symbol of freedom for America. Not a peasant woman, but Lady Liberty herself. In 1871, Bartholdi traveled to America for the first time. He sailed into New York Harbor, and as his ship passed a small island called Bedloe's Island, he had a revelation. There, that island, that was where she would stand, perfectly positioned so every ship entering New York would see her. Every immigrant would be welcomed by her torch. He sketched frantically. He took measurements. He imagined exactly how she would look from the water, from the city, from every angle. Then he began the political campaign. He met with President Ulysses S. Grant. He met with senators, businessmen, journalists. He showed his sketches and explained his vision. France would build the statue as a gift, but America would have to build the pedestal to place her on. Most Americans were polite but skeptical. Build a giant statue on an island in the harbor? Why? What's the point? We have more important things to spend money on. But Bartholdi refused to give up. He returned to France and began designing the statue in earnest. And here's where the real challenges began. Because Bartholdi was a sculptor, not an engineer, he knew how to create beautiful forms in clay and plaster, but this statue had to be 151 feet tall, made of copper, hollow inside, strong enough to survive ocean winds and Atlantic storms. How do you build something like that? He had absolutely no idea. The engineer, when genius met genius. This is where the story gets truly incredible. Because Bartholdi knew he needed help. He needed the greatest engineer in France, and in 1876 he found him, Gustave Eiffel. Yes, that Eiffel, the man who would later build the Eiffel Tower. In 1876, he was already famous for building revolutionary iron bridges and structures. He understood something that most architects and sculptors didn't: how to use internal frameworks to support massive structures. When Bartholdi explained his vision, Eiffel was intrigued, but he was also practical. He said, "You want to build a 151-foot copper statue that will stand on an island exposed to wind, rain, and salt water? Impossible, unless..." And then Eiffel had his own vision. He would create a massive iron skeleton inside the statue, 4 huge iron pillars forming a pylon in the center, with a secondary framework of iron bars branching out like a tree. The copper skin would hang on this framework using a system of flexible supports. This was revolutionary. The copper skin could expand and contract with temperature changes without cracking. The iron skeleton would bear all the structural weight, and the entire statue could sway slightly in strong winds without breaking. It was genius meeting genius. Bartholdi's artistic vision combined with Eiffel's engineering brilliance. Together, they would create something that had never been done before. But there was one massive problem: money. Building the Statue of Liberty would cost a fortune. In 1875, the estimated cost was 600,000 francs. That's about $250,000 at the time, or roughly $7 million in today's money. And remember, France was supposed to pay for the statue, and America was supposed to pay for the pedestal, which would cost another fortune. Where would this money come from? Bartholdi and his supporters launched a fundraising campaign across France. They organized benefit concerts, art exhibitions, and theatrical performances. They sold miniature models of the statue. They published articles in newspapers begging for donations. And slowly, painfully, the money came in. French people donated whatever they could afford. Wealthy patrons contributed thousands of francs. Small villages sent modest donations. School children gave their pocket money. But it wasn't enough. The project constantly ran out of money. Work would start, then stop. Workers would be paid, then laid off. For years, the statue existed only as Bartholdi's obsession, a dream that seemed impossible to realize. But Bartholdi kept working. In his workshop in Paris, he created the statue piece by piece. First, he made a small clay model, just 4 feet tall. Then he made a larger model, 9 feet tall. Then an even larger one, 36 feet tall. Each time he refined the design, perfected the details, made sure every fold of her robe looked natural, every finger was positioned correctly. And then came the most ambitious phase, creating the full-size statue. The construction, building a goddess in pieces. The process Bartholdi and Eiffel used was called repoussé, an ancient metalworking technique, but it had never been used on this scale before. Never. Here's how it worked. First, Bartholdi created full-size wooden molds for each section of the statue. Then, sheets of copper, about as thick as 2 pennies stacked together, were hammered over these molds. Skilled workers hit the copper thousands of times with wooden mallets, slowly shaping it to match the mold exactly. This was not machine work. This was handwork. Hour after hour, skilled workers hammered copper sheets into the shape of Liberty's face, her hands, the folds of her robe, the spikes of her crown. The statue was divided into about 300 copper pieces. Each piece had to fit perfectly with the others. Each piece had to be precisely shaped. Any mistake, and the entire section would be ruined. Inside Bartholdi's workshop in Paris, the statue began to take shape, but not all at once. Piece by piece. First, the right hand holding the torch was completed in 1876. It was so impressive that Bartholdi sent it to the Philadelphia Centennial Exhibition in America. Americans could climb inside the torch and look out. People were amazed. This hand alone was massive, beautiful, perfectly crafted. Suddenly, Americans began to believe, maybe this crazy French sculptor could actually build this thing. Next came the head, completed in 1878. It was displayed at the Paris World's Fair. Visitors could climb inside and look out through Liberty's crown. The face was serene, calm, powerful. This was not just a statue, this was a goddess. But while Bartholdi worked in Paris, trouble was brewing in America, because America had a responsibility: build the pedestal, and America was failing. The American committee formed to raise money for the pedestal couldn't get enough donations. New Yorkers didn't want to pay for it. They said, "Why should we pay for a French statue? Let the French pay for everything." Americans in other states said, "Why should we pay for something in New York? Put it somewhere else." The project was dying, and Bartholdi, watching from Paris, was desperate. He had spent 10 years building this statue. He had poured his heart, his money, his entire life into it, and now it might never be erected because Americans wouldn't build a pedestal. But life is unpredictable. Even when all hope seems lost, sometimes a hero emerges. The Savior: How a Newspaper Publisher Rescued Lady Liberty. In 1885, the Statue of Liberty project was in crisis. The statue itself was complete, standing in pieces in Paris, waiting to be disassembled and shipped to America. But in America, the pedestal was half finished. The American committee had run out of money. Work had stopped. The project was dead. Most wealthy Americans refused to donate. They said the statue was a waste of money. Some newspapers even mocked the project, calling it Bartholdi's folly. And then Joseph Pulitzer stepped forward. Pulitzer was a Hungarian immigrant who had come to America with nothing. He worked his way up and eventually bought a struggling newspaper called the New York World. He was passionate about immigrants, about America's promise of opportunity. And when he heard that the Statue of Liberty might never be erected, he was furious. In March 1885, Pulitzer launched an editorial campaign in his newspaper. He wrote scathing attacks on wealthy Americans who wouldn't donate. He wrote, "Let us not wait for the millionaires to give this money. It is not a gift from the millionaires of France to the millionaires of America, but a gift from the whole people of France to the whole people of America." He promised to publish the name of every single person who donated, no matter how small the amount. Rich or poor, everyone's contribution would be honored equally. And then something miraculous happened. The donations poured in, not from the wealthy elite, but from ordinary Americans. A carpenter sent 50 cents. A group of children sent the money they'd saved for candy, $1.35. A poor widow sent everything she had, $2. Immigrants who had just arrived in America sent their spare coins. Within 5 months, Pulitzer raised over $100,000, enough to complete the pedestal. He published over 120,000 names in his newspaper. The Statue of Liberty was saved by the people, not by the elite. It was the most successful fundraising campaign in American history up to that point, and it proved something important. The Statue of Liberty belonged to everyone, especially to those who came to America seeking a better life. Meanwhile, in France, in early 1885, the statue was finally ready. The complete statue stood assembled in Bartholdi's workshop for a few months so Parisians could see her. Crowds came to marvel at her beauty. She towered over the Paris rooftops, visible from blocks away. Some people wept at her beauty. This was France's gift to America, and they were proud. But now came the terrifying task: take her apart, pack her into crates, and ship her across the Atlantic Ocean. The journey: crossing the ocean in 214 crates. Disassembling the Statue of Liberty took months. Every copper piece had to be carefully removed from the iron framework. Every piece had to be numbered so it could be reassembled correctly in America. Every piece had to be packed so it wouldn't be damaged during the voyage. In total, the statue was packed into 214 wooden crates. The weight: 225 tons of copper and iron. The largest crate weighed over 3 tons. On May 21, 1885, the French naval ship Isère left Paris carrying the Statue of Liberty. The journey across the Atlantic was dangerous. The ship encountered terrible storms. Waves crashed over the deck. Some crew members were convinced the cargo would shift and the ship would capsize. But the captain, a skilled sailor, navigated through the storms. and on June 17, 1885, after nearly a month at sea, the Isairs sailed into New York Harbor. Crowds gathered to cheer. Boats filled the harbor. A huge celebration erupted. The Statue of Liberty had arrived in America. But she was still in crates, still in pieces, and now came the most challenging part of all, putting her back together on Bedloe's Island. The pedestal, designed by American architect Morris Hunt, was finally completed in April 1886. It stood 154 feet tall, built from concrete and granite. Inside was an iron framework to support the statue's weight. It was a masterpiece of engineering in itself. Now began the reassembly. The iron internal structure went up first. Piece by piece, workers erected Eiffel's skeleton. It rose from the pedestal like a giant metal tree. Then came the copper skin. Starting from the bottom, workers attached each copper piece to the iron framework using Eiffel's flexible mounting system. This work was incredibly difficult. Workers had to climb the iron structure, hoiling heavy copper pieces up with them. They worked in blazing summer heat and freezing winter winds. One wrong move, one loose bolt, and someone could fall to their death. And there were accidents. Workers fell. Some were injured, but miraculously no one died during the construction. It seemed that fate wanted Lady Liberty to stand. Month after month, the statue grew. First her feet and robe appeared, then her body, then her arms, finally her head and crown. By October 1886, she was complete. Standing 305 feet from the ground to the tip of her torch, she was the tallest structure in New York City at that time. Bartholdi, now 52 years old, came to America to see his life's work finally complete. He climbed inside the statue, up the narrow spiral staircase, all the way to the crown. He looked out through the windows at New York Harbor, at the ships passing below, at the city in the distance. 21 years. That's how long it had taken from La Boulet's dinner party to this moment. 21 years of struggle, doubt, and determination. And now she stood exactly as he had envisioned, welcoming the world to America. But the most mysterious question is this: what does the Statue of Liberty really symbolize? What do all her features mean? Look closely at the Statue of Liberty. Every detail has meaning. Every element tells part of her story. The torch, she holds it high in her right hand, 305 feet above the ground. This represents enlightenment, the light of knowledge and freedom spreading throughout the world. Originally, Bartholdi wanted the torch to function as a real lighthouse with powerful lamps inside, but that proved impractical. Today, the torch is covered in gold leaf and illuminated by external lights. The tablet. In her left hand, she holds a tablet inscribed JULYIVMCCLL76, July 4, 1776, the date of American independence. This represents the law, the foundation of democracy, the written principles that protect freedom. The crown. She wears a crown with 7 spikes. These represent the 7 continents and 7 seas, symbolizing universal liberty spreading across the entire world. The broken chains. Look at her fate. Most people never notice this, but she's standing on broken chains and shackles. This symbolizes breaking free from oppression and tyranny. This detail is especially significant because the statue was completed just 21 years after slavery was abolished in America. The robe. She wears a classical Roman robe, styled after Libertas, the Roman goddess of liberty. This connects America's freedom to the classical ideals of ancient democracy. But there's something else, something most people don't know. The face of the Statue of Liberty was modeled after Bartholdi's mother. Yes, his strict, domineering mother who controlled his life. He gave America his mother's face. Some psychologists have analyzed this and find it fascinating. Bartholdi transformed his relationship with his mother into a symbol of freedom. The woman who restricted him in life became the woman who welcomed millions to liberty. And there's another secret, a mystery that historians still debate. Some people believe the Statue of Liberty was originally supposed to be a tribute to the abolition of slavery. The broken chains at her feet support this theory. The timing of her creation, just after the American Civil War, supports it. But others say this is reading too much into it, that Bartholdi simply intended a general symbol of freedom. The truth is probably a mix. Liberty meant different things to different people involved in the project. To Bartholdi, it was artistic achievement. To Laboulaye, it was political inspiration. To Pulitzer and the immigrants who donated, it was hope for a better life. To former slaves and their descendants, it was the promise of equality. The Statue of Liberty became all of these things, and more. The unveiling, a day America changed forever. October 28, 1886, the day the Statue of Liberty was officially unveiled. New York City had never seen anything like it. It was the greatest celebration in American history up to that point. A massive parade marched through Manhattan. Military bands played, soldiers marched, dignitaries rode in carriages. President Grover Cleveland attended. Bartholdi was there, proud but exhausted. The French ambassador was there, representing the gift from his nation. Ships filled the harbor, over 300 vessels, all decorated with flags and banners. Fireworks were prepared for the evening celebration. 1 million people gathered to witness history. At Bedloe's Island, the statue stood covered by a huge French flag, waiting for the moment of unveiling. Bartholdi himself was inside the statue, near the top, holding the rope that would release the flag. He was supposed to wait for a signal from the opening ceremony. But there was a problem. The speeches were long, boring, droning on and on. The crowd was restless. Boats in the harbor began blasting their horns, impatient to see Lady Liberty revealed. And then a young boy in the ceremony waved a handkerchief. Bartholdi, watching from inside the statue, thought this was the signal. He pulled the rope. The French flag fell away. Suddenly, Liberty's face was revealed to the world. The crowd erupted. Ships blasted their horns. People cheered and screamed. Fireworks began exploding even though it was still daytime. The noise was deafening. The speakers tried to continue, but no one could hear them anymore. The celebration had taken over. For hours, the city celebrated. Ships circled the island. People sang. Strangers embraced. It felt like the entire nation had been waiting for this moment. But not everyone was celebrating. Women's suffrage activists protested the unveiling. They said it was hypocritical to celebrate liberty with a female statue when women couldn't even vote in America. They chartered a boat and circled the island, holding signs, "Liberty is a mockery when women are not free." They were right. In 1886, women couldn't vote. African Americans faced terrible discrimination despite the end of slavery. Native Americans were still being displaced from their lands. America's promise of liberty was incomplete. But the Statue of Liberty became a challenge to America, a reminder of what the nation claimed to stand for. And over the next century, activists would point to Lady Liberty and say, "You promised freedom, now give it to everyone." Transformation: how a statue became a symbol. For the first 15 years after her unveiling, the Statue of Liberty was just a statue. Impressive, yes, beautiful, certainly, but not yet the powerful symbol she would become. That transformation began with immigrants.
Starting in the 1990s, massive waves of immigrants arrived in America from Europe. They came fleeing poverty, persecution, and war. They crossed the Atlantic in cramped ship compartments, often sick, always scared, hoping America would be better. And the first thing they saw when their ships entered New York Harbor was her, the Statue of Liberty, standing tall, torch held high, welcoming them. For these immigrants, Lady Liberty became something sacred. She represented hope. She represented the promise that in America you could build a new life. She represented freedom from the old world's restrictions and hatreds. Many immigrants wept when they first saw her. They pointed her out to their children, telling them, "Look, we made it. We're in America now. We're safe." Between 1892 and 1954, over 12 million immigrants passed through Ellis Island, the immigration processing center near the Statue of Liberty. For all of them, Lady Liberty was their first greeting to America. But there was a dark rumor. Some historians believe that the actual experience at Ellis Island was far harsher than the welcoming symbolism suggested. Immigration officials could be cruel. Medical inspections were humiliating. Names were changed without asking. Families were sometimes separated. Some immigrants were denied entry and sent back across the ocean after coming so far. The Statue of Liberty welcomed everyone, but America didn't always live up to her promise. Then, in 1903, something happened that cemented Lady Liberty's identity as the immigrant's symbol. A poem was mounted on a bronze plaque inside the pedestal, a poem that most Americans can still quote today. The poem was The New Colossus by Emma Lazarus. She had written it in 1883 to help raise money for the pedestal, but it was largely forgotten until 1903. The most famous lines read, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed, to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door."
These words transformed the statue's meaning. Bartholdi had created a symbol of abstract liberty, but Lazarus's poem turned it into something more specific, a welcome to immigrants, to the poor, to the oppressed. The Statue of Liberty was no longer just representing American freedom, she was offering that freedom to the world. This was not what Bartholdi originally intended, but it was what the statue became. And this new meaning made her even more powerful. The decline, when Lady Liberty began to crumble. But soon Lady Liberty faced her greatest threat, time itself. By the 1980s, nearly 100 years after her unveiling, the Statue of Liberty was falling apart. The copper skin had turned green, oxidized by exposure to sea air. This was expected and actually protected the copper from further deterioration. But inside, things were much worse. The iron framework designed by Eiffel was corroding. Salt water and moisture had created rust. Some iron bars had rusted completely through. The flexible mounting system connecting the copper skin to the iron framework was failing. In some places, the copper was pulling away from the frame. The torch was in terrible condition. In 1916, during World War I, there had been an explosion at a nearby munitions depot. The blast damaged the torch, cracking its glass panels. A poorly designed repair in the 1980s had made things worse. Water was leaking inside, accelerating the deterioration. The internal structure was also dangerous. The original stairs were narrow and steep. Lighting was poor, ventilation was terrible. On hot summer days, the temperature inside could reach 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Visitors regularly fainted from heat exhaustion. Something had to be done. either restore the statue or watch it slowly collapse. In 1984, President Ronald Reagan announced a massive restoration project. The Statue of Liberty would be completely renovated in time for her 100th birthday in 1986. The estimated cost? $87 million. But the government didn't pay for it. Just like in 1885, the people would save Lady Liberty. Corporations donated millions. Ordinary Americans sent contributions. Even school children held fundraisers. For 2 years, the statue was surrounded by scaffolding. Workers carefully removed and replaced 1,600 iron bars in the internal structure, using stainless steel instead of iron to prevent future corrosion. They replaced the torch entirely with a new one, covered in gold leaf, exactly as Bartholdi had originally intended. They cleaned the copper skin. They improved the ventilation and lighting inside. The restoration was an engineering marvel. Workers had to understand 19th century techniques while using 20th century materials. They had to preserve Bartholdi and Eiffel's vision while making the structure safe for modern visitors. On July 4, 1986, exactly 100 years after the statue's unveiling, President Reagan presided over a massive rededication ceremony. Fireworks filled the sky, ships filled the harbor, millions watched on television. Lady Liberty had been saved. Again, not by the government or the wealthy, but by the American people who loved what she represented. The legacy. Why does Lady Liberty matter? Why should we care about a 135-year-old statue built by a Frenchman obsessed with a dream? Because the Statue of Liberty is more than copper and iron. She has become the physical embodiment of an idea that freedom is universal, that everyone deserves a chance to build a better life, that America, despite its flaws, still represents hope for millions around the world. Think about it. When protesters around the world fight for freedom, they often build replicas of the Statue of Liberty. When China crushed the Tiananmen Square protests in 1989, students had erected a goddess of democracy that looked like Lady Liberty. When people imagine freedom, they see her. The Statue of Liberty has appeared in countless movies, books, and artworks. She's been destroyed by aliens in Independence Day, buried in sand in Planet of the Apes, climbed by heroes and villains. She's become a shorthand for America itself, recognized instantly anywhere in the world. But she's also become a challenge. When America fails to live up to its ideals, activists point to Lady Liberty and say, "You promised us freedom. You promised equality. Now deliver." The women's suffrage protesters in 1886 were right. Lady Liberty was a mockery when women couldn't vote. But their protest and the protests of millions who followed eventually forced America to change. Women got the vote in 1920. The civil rights movement of the 1960s pushed America closer to racial equality. The fight continues today. Lady Liberty stands as a permanent reminder of America's promises, and as long as she stands, Americans cannot forget what they claimed to believe. Today, over 4 million people visit the Statue of Liberty each year. They climb the 354 stairs to her crown. They look out over New York Harbor, seeing what immigrants saw a century ago. They take photos, but photos cannot capture what it feels like to stand inside Lady Liberty, to feel the history, to sense the millions of hopes and dreams that have been projected on her. Scientists and engineers marvel at her construction. How did Bartholdi and Eiffel create something so durable, so beautiful, using 19th century technology? How does she still stand after 135 years of wind, rain, and Atlantic storms? Historians study her evolution. How did a French sculptor's dream become America's most powerful symbol? How did she transform from an abstract idea into the patron saint of immigrants? Artists continue to be inspired by her. She appears in paintings, sculptures, photographs, graffiti. She's been reimagined in every style and medium. Each generation sees something different in her. And when Americans abroad see her image, many feel a surge of emotion. She represents home. She represents what America is supposed to be, even when it falls short. The famous journalist and author Pete Hamill once wrote, "For millions of Americans, the Statue of Liberty is the most potent symbol we have. She tells us who we want to be, even when we're not living up to it."
This proves that the Statue of Liberty is not just an American monument. She's a human monument. She belongs to everyone who has ever yearned for freedom, who has ever dreamed of a better life, who has ever hoped that tomorrow could be different from today. The conclusion: the eternal torch. And that is why the Statue of Liberty will live forever. Not just because she's made of durable copper and steel, though she is, not just because she's protected and maintained, though she is, but because the Statue of Liberty represents something that will never die, the human desire for freedom. The story of the Statue of Liberty is not just about a sculpture. It is about vision and determination. It's about friendship between nations. It's about ordinary people achieving extraordinary things when united by a common cause. It's about art and engineering combining to create something greater than either could achieve alone. It is a monument built by a man who refused to give up, even when everyone said his dream was impossible, even when he ran out of money, even when countries refused to cooperate, even when it took 21 years of his life. And he succeeded. Bartholdi died in 1904 at age 70. He lived to see his creation become beloved by millions. He saw her become more than he had even imagined. He saw her transform from his personal vision into a universal symbol. Today, more than 135 years after her unveiling, the Statue of Liberty still stands. She has outlasted wars, economic depressions, terrorist attacks, and political upheavals. She stood strong after 9/11 when New York City was attacked. She stood as a reminder that America's ideals survive even the darkest moments. The copper skin that once gleamed bright brown is now green with patina, but that green has become iconic. We can't imagine her any other way. The torch that Bartholdi wanted to light the harbor now lights something more important: the hope in millions of hearts. The chains at her feet remind us that freedom must be fought for, that liberty is not given freely, that every generation must defend and expand the promise she represents. People from every nation on earth recognize the Statue of Liberty. They know what she means. They understand her promise, even if their own countries deny them freedom. She is eternal. She is unforgettable. She is powerful. She is hope made manifest in copper and iron. She is proof that one person's vision, if pursued with enough determination, can change the world. She is proof that ordinary people, giving what they can achieve extraordinary things. She is proof that symbols matter, that ideas have power, that freedom is worth fighting for.
The French people who donated their francs are gone. The American immigrants who wept at their first sight of her are gone. Bartholdi, Eiffel, Pulitzer, all gone. But their legacy remains. And as long as humans exist, as long as people yearn to breathe free, as long as the tired and poor seek hope, the Statue of Liberty will matter. She is not just welcoming immigrants to America, she is welcoming all of us to the possibility of freedom. She is reminding all of us that we can be better than we are. It is eternal, it is unforgettable, it is the Statue of Liberty. And that is why Lady Liberty's torch will burn forever.